I sell printables since May 2023 last year, and I'm basically in the productivity space where I would say the competition is actually quite high. And also my niche, I would say, is a niche, productivity, but at the same time, it's still quite broad. So in today's video, I want to talk a bit about what I learned from selling printables on Etsy. I want to ask myself, and would I do something differently? And spoiler alert, my answer I think would be yes. From what I know now, after over a year being on Etsy and selling printables on Etsy, and you will learn in this video why I would say yes. But before we get started, grab your 50 digital product ideas for free in the link in the description. And also, if you haven't started your Etsy shop yet, you can grab 40 free listings. Just click the link in the description below. Let's get started. So the first thing I would say, it's probably something you don't want to hear, but it is about niching down. Niching down is quite a difficult task, I would say, because first of all, you need a very specific idea. And also when you don't niche down, it comes with its own difficulties. In my niche, which again, it's quite a broad niche, the productivity niche, I have found some really good nuggets and where I made a lot of sales. And that's great, I would say. But at the end of the day, it was still quite difficult to find out what these nuggets were. And I definitely just had to do it with learning by doing. I had to just create it and experiment and see what works. Obviously, I did a lot of research as well, but there's only so much you can do with research. At the end of the day, it's also very important that you put yourself out there and try things for yourself to really get a proper picture of what is in demand, what is selling, and what are people interested in. And also, I realized by not niching down like completely, I was wondering if I made it a little bit more difficult for myself. But honestly, I totally get it. When you have never been on Etsy and you start with, whatever you are interested in or what your skill set is, then you just have to, start and see how it goes. You can obviously participate in courses and watch videos, which I definitely have done. And it's a good thing to do that, but it will still not give you the 100% you need to really know what you're doing on Etsy. And I also get it that niching down is not always very easy. If you're anything like me, I would say I don't have like a super skill set. For example, I'm not a therapist. A therapist has really a good idea of what people want. They can create the printables for it. They can ask questions. They can structure whatever to sell it to people. And it is really beneficial for those customers. Or I'm not a teacher or a homeschooling mom. So for me, it takes even more effort to really dive into that area to find out what people want, what is in demand. And if you are a teacher or homeschooling mom, you have already a lot of knowledge about it and can start creating these printables and sell them. And you normally know, that is in demand. Another example is I'm not a nurse, I have seen that actually, studying to be a nurse or, when you are a nurse, there's a lot of printables you can create around this proficiency. But I'm not a nurse. I don't have the knowledge. I could maybe look into it, but it would be less authentic, right? It is also just easier for someone who is a nurse to dive into that niche and really make it their own and know what people want. And there are other examples, like, for example, if you're a real estate agent, you have a lot of knowledge and skills. Or if you rent Airbnbs, there's a lot you can do. Of course, again, these niches don't have to be out of question for you. You can still tap into these, but you will just have a harder time to really come up with ideas and to go really into detail what people want. And therefore, I understand that it is sometimes really difficult to find your niche. And I feel like I'm still quite broad and I'm still like debating with myself if I should go more niche at some point or even start a new channel? Yeah, these are just ongoing questions. And when I reflect on what I have really learned about being on Etsy and selling printables, then it's definitely about the skill set you have, the knowledge you have. It will help you a lot to stand out also from the crowd and be authentic and just come up with a lot of ideas as well. It will be just easier for you to create printables. But it is not lost if you can't find the niche you are looking for, or you know, after you heard all of this, you're like, oh, I cannot be on Etsy if I don't, you know, find a very good niche. On the opposite, I would say you do have a good chance as well if you go a little bit more for quantity. And I know this sounds a little bit bad when you talk about quantity. I'm not excluding quality. I think you still have to create really quality products. But obviously, the more listings, the more products you have, the higher the chance is that people buy it from you. And I'm not talking about creating random like printables just for the sake of quantity. Of course not. But the more you produce, the more likely it is that you get discovered and that something really sparks interest. Also, if you build a brand, for example, that is also a really, really good thing. For example, I have a really distinctive like brand, you know, I really thought about it. All my listings look fairly similar. Like you can really see I have, you know, a brand identity. And what people actually do, sometimes they find one listing and then they look at my shop and see, you know, like, oh, the cohesive, like overall look and stuff. And then they look at other items and think like, oh, that sounds really interesting. That's actually quite cool. And they add it to their cart. So sometimes I have customers where I know they were browsing through my Etsy shop and just adding things they thought are really, really cool and beneficial to them. And then they bought, you know, sometimes 5 to 10 items from my shop. Not to forget, I also have a whole shop listing where basically people can buy my whole shop and even get updates for free. I'm mentioning this because if you're planning to have an Etsy shop and you want to sell printables, then it's probably better to have a mindset that you will have a lot of printables, a lot of listings you need to create, you know, and 20 listings will probably not make you super successful. I mean, it really depends. I have found like exceptions. Of course, you always find exceptions. But I have seen some shops maybe just with, you know, 10, 20 listings, but normally they have like bundles. So in one listing, they have 100 and plus printables, pages, and, you know, you still have to create those even if you don't, you know, sell every single page basically individually. So then it's okay to have less listings, but at the end of the day, it's still a lot of quantity they sell and have to create. So that is definitely something you have to bear in mind when you go with printables on Etsy. You have to bear in mind that the quantity plays probably a big role. And I would say like I'm probably also more on the quantity side. Like I mentioned, I'm in a productivity niche. It's very competitive. It is not enough for me, I think, to just have a few kind of you know, listings. Like I mentioned before, like people sometimes discover my shop and then browse through it and shop other items. So yeah, for me it makes sense to go for quantity, obviously bearing in mind quality. I, for example, found this Etsy shop, My Life Plans, and when you go and see how many listings they have, it's over 1,152, and that's really a lot of listings. And yeah, you can see it's a lot of single listings for like, what do we have here, like $2-3 basically, and then a few more expensive ones. But yeah, that you need a lot of quantity, a lot of printables here. And you can see also they have over 122,000 sales. So this is definitely a shop which is all about quantity, although the quality is also really nice. It's very minimalistic, but yeah, you can see like it's popular and people like, yeah, love it, but it's all about the quantity. What else? Like if you want to sell printables, you can have another perspective, you know, how you can make it work. And another idea is to have a community or have your social media set up. You can certainly be successful on Etsy without any social media, without community. You know, if you do your Etsy SEO, you can be found on Etsy, and they also use offsite ads, so your listings can be even found outside of Etsy. So that's not a problem. But I have seen examples where a community, a social media presence really made a difference. It was a game changer. And of course, it takes some dedication and time. Like having a social media presence, you know, it's definitely more effort. And I guess that's why also not everyone is doing it. And if you do it right, you can be really successful with it. Of course, one question is always like, would you drive your traffic to your Etsy shop? And would it not be better to maybe have your own website because you pay so many fees on Etsy? And it's a very valid question, but at the same time, we should not forget having your own website also comes a little bit with, you know, effort. You have to find a hosting company, which you probably pay for also monthly. I, for example, have Shopify. I definitely pay monthly, and it's not cheap. It's about $25-30 per month, and you have to set up everything. So, and then another thing to think about is like people know Etsy and they trust Etsy normally. So when you have content on social media and they want to like buy from you, then finding maybe an Etsy shop is just more trustworthy and people would be more willing to buy from you than maybe if you have a website and they don't really know you. Yeah, I mean, these things are to consider, but some people have a social media presence and they drive traffic to Etsy. And I actually found a really good example. When I did my research, I found some accounts and I was like, wow, they're doing so well. Like, what's the difference to my shop? And I actually found out they have a social media account for, in this instance, it was actually a TikTok account, and they're doing really, really well on TikTok. And yeah, driving a lot of traffic from their TikTok account, and people are buying like crazy. So if you want to consider selling printables, you know, putting more background behind them and explaining people more and showing people more, having a social media presence is really, really valuable. But of course, it also takes quite a bit of time. And then one thing I also learned from selling printables is that printables are actually quite cheap. At the very beginning, I really wasn't 100% aware what it actually means to sell printables, how much money I potentially can make. You know, sometimes you think like, okay, if I sell X amount of this and that, you can calculate maybe, but it's very unpredictable. And one thing I really noticed is it's much harder to sell printables for a higher price. Only really when you have like bundles, you know, where you bundle a lot of printables and you sell them in one package, like 100 plus printables, and then you can put a higher price to it. And if you sell more, you know, you make obviously more money. With other digital products, it might be, you know, easier to make money with one purchase. So for example, if you have a Notion template and you sell it for $10, it's easier, you know, to have these $10 rather than having a printable with $2. Again, it always depends like how many people are buying. But for example, I had one product going viral on Pinterest. So I got a lot of traffic from Pinterest and people were buying, you know, but this printable was only $2-3. So I needed a lot of people to buy my product. You know, if I had 100 people a month buying it, you know, that was only $200. That's not that much, I would say. It obviously depends what you want from your Etsy shop. If you want like just a little bit of income on the side, then this is amazing. But if you want to make it more like your full-time business, then $200 will not do it. But even like 200 people buying it is also just like, you know, $400 or maybe $500, you know, when it is a little bit more worth than $2. Anyways, my point is it's just harder to sell items which are low ticket, you know, which is just $2-3. And that's why I guess sometimes people love print on demand, because the item, you know, costs maybe like $30 or something, which they pay a lot, but they probably make like $10 or maybe more, $10-15 from one product sold. And that is just something I want you to be aware of. And yeah, bear in mind when you sell printables on Etsy that you really have to look at, again, quantity, that you sell a lot to make more money, or you create these bundles which you can then sell for more. But it also obviously depends on your competition competition. And last but not least, what I also learned from selling printables on Etsy is that you really have to pack a lot of value into your listings. So like I said earlier, if you have one printable, normally you cannot sell it more than $2-3. Obviously it depends on your niche, and if it's something, you know, which doesn't really exist on Etsy, or you don't have much competition and it is really in demand, then of course you can up your price. But in general, I would say you cannot, you know, charge too much for a printable. Then you have your bundles, of course, and you can charge more. But most of the time, you know, when you have 100 plus printables, that's a lot, I would say, and that takes you quite a lot of time to create these. Of course, you only have to create it once. That's the beauty of it. Once you create it, you don't have to, you know, do it again in that capacity, and you just sell it. And the more it sells, the more it kind of becomes passive to you. But, you know, you just make maybe $10-15 from a bundle as well, based on probably your competition. Then again, it is maybe quite good to have a very good niche, certain skill set, so the value of it is much higher. For example, if you are a therapist, that is a very big niche where you need all this knowledge and these skills, and it's probably harder to get it somewhere else. So you can charge a little bit more for it. Just to give you an example, or you have a community maybe, then they know you and they trust you and they really value you as a person and your creations. For example, I bought a Notion template quite a while back and I paid $40 for it. And I find that very expensive. Like when you look on Etsy, you find a lot of different Notion templates. The competition is also getting bigger, and I'm sure I could have found a cheaper version of what I actually had. But I bought from a YouTuber. Like I'm watching her YouTube videos, and you know, you build a little bit of a connection, even if they don't know you, but you trust them and you like what they are doing. And when they bring something out like a Notion template, you feel like you trust that person and you don't mind spending a little bit more money on it. So that's why I was also talking about the community building, or, you know, having a certain niche. All this factors into your pricing, but in general, just put as much value in your products as possible, so people have the feeling, oh wow, you get all of this for that amount. That is such a good deal. Like, I love it. I put it in my cart and I'm going to buy it. So you want to create that feeling in customers that they get something really valuable and it's a decent price. And I'm saying that because as an Etsy seller, you put a lot of effort and time into your products, and you just want people to buy it, you know, and you want to get the reward, you know, which is the money, you know, and the recognition that people really love your product. But at the end of the day, you have to be very careful, because there is no like 50-50, you know, you put that amount in and you get that amount out. It feels more like you put a lot in, a lot in, and then you get maybe a little bit less out. But then again, it's about the quantity as well. So you have to find a little bit of a balance there. I think the expectations are like very different when you start your Etsy shop. It certainly was with me, because I put so much effort in. I really wanted to see results and see success. And if I didn't see it, it felt disappointing, right? But yeah, if you shift your mindset a little bit and just concentrate on like, I will put a lot of value into this and people will really appreciate it and buy my product. That is something I wanted to give you on your way if you consider selling printables on Etsy. So I hope you enjoyed this video, and let me know in the comments down below if you're considering selling printables on Etsy, or if you already have started and how's it going. I would love to hear from you. Until then, I will see you in my next video. Bye!